Okay, so hello from Cyberprotection Magazine to our, I believe it's the third roundtable. We've actually done one on IoT, Internet of Things security earlier, and that's the topic we have today again as well. And I'm very happy to have quite a few participants here. Yeah, I'd like to ask you guys to introduce yourself shortly, and we'll start, of course, ladies first, with Christina.
You can't imagine how many times I've heard that. Hey guys, pleasure meeting you. My name is Christine Schönig. I am with Checkpoint for almost, hang on a second, almost 13 years right now. I do, as the SE Regional Director, look after the pre-sales consulting team in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and of course, enjoying my life with lots of our customers.
Okay, thanks, Christina. And I'm going sort of from left to right here. So, Chris, you'd like to go next?
Thanks, Patrick. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Dobrik. I'm with Armis, and I joined Armis about 2 years ago, but have been in cybersecurity for got almost 15 years now. But prior to joining Armis, where I lead product marketing, I ran product management for a company called Mobile Iron, where I built the early MDM products that Mobile Iron brought to market. But happy to be here and chatting about this topic in IoT. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Chris. And Michael, you're next, at least on my screen.
All right. Well, my name is Michael Yoshua. I am the VP of Global Marketing at SCADAfence. I'm also a thought leader in OT security. I've been in OT for quite a while, for I think a good 4 years already. Very passionate about the field and protecting the world's critical infrastructure with many other brilliant people here on this call.
Thanks, Michael. And then as a sort of showcase that we're doing a sort of global live show here, Alan joined us from San Francisco, it is, right?
I'm in San Francisco at the moment, yes, at the Design Automation Conference and RISC-V events that are being held here this week. But yeah, normally I'm in the Midwest, but I'm with PQ Shield, and PQ Shield is actually a spin out from Oxford University, so we're headquartered over in the UK. And our focus is on post-quantum crypto solutions, so new crypto algorithms to replace RSA and ECC. And so, IoT devices we were just chatting about before we started recording, have a very long life cycle. So, future-proofing those with next-generation crypto is really a critical topic that we're helping to address. And before that, I was the co-founder and CEO at Icon Labs, a startup focused on IoT security, and actually ran that business for a little over 20 years before it was acquired by Sectigo, one of the certificate authority companies. And so spent a couple of years there, and then transitioned back into the startup world with PQ Shield, and been with PQ Shield for about 4 months now.
Thanks, Alan. And last but not least, from the farthest to the closest, so to speak, because we just established that Kai is only a few kilometers away from me, right, Kai?
Indeed. Thank you. Hi, my name is Kai Ernst, and I was originally born and raised in a little town in the southern part of Germany called Erlangen. This is where you can go to university or work for Siemens, which is what my father did for 35 years. I did all my holiday jobs, all my apprenticeships there. Then I went to the dark side, being in IT security for 20 odd years, and I just joined Otorio half year ago to take care of OT security once again. And at Otorio, I'm leading the sales efforts in the Central European region.
Okay, thanks, Kai. And yeah, topic is IoT security. The invitation for today, we sort of highlighted a novel from a German author, which sort of predicted a total global blackout because of a hack back in 2012. And of course, that's fiction. Very good book, though. I read it myself, and it's now also made into a television series, I believe. But the question is, that's how I'd like to start the discussion. How far away from reality is that? I mean, we've seen the Colonial pipeline hack this year. We've seen the Florida water supply. So it seems like that sort of reality is getting closer. So let's start with a very bold question: are we all doomed? Michael, what do you think?
Well, you don't have to take my word for it. You can take Gartner's word for it. They released a new report called Predict 2022, and I'll share with you two quotes from this report. Number one, they write, by 2024, a cyber attack will so damage critical infrastructure that a member of the G20 will reciprocate with a declared physical attack. This is the first quote. The second quote, which I think is a little bit scarier, they write, by 2025, attackers will have weaponized a critical infrastructure cyber-physical system to successfully harm or kill humans. So this is what Gartner has to say. I can tell you that this actually wasn't fiction, because 6 years ago, in December 2015, was the notorious Black Energy, or the Ukraine grid power attack. Basically, the cyber attack on Ukraine's power grid resulted in power outages for, I think, 230,000 innocent civilians. I think they shut out all the power for about a half hour. The attack was pretty complex, but it wasn't too difficult to do. It wasn't like a nation state attack. If you want, I can give you like a 1 minute overview of what the attackers did. Is that cool? All right, so here's what they did. Basically, they compromised the corporate networks by sending spear phishing emails. Afterwards, they took control of the SCADA systems and remotely switched off the substations. From there, they disabled and destroyed IT infrastructure like the power supplies, modems, and ITUs. And they also destroyed files that were located on servers and workstations. And then they even did a denial of service to the call center. When customers were calling and wondering what was happening, the call center was down. So nobody had any idea that it was an attack. This happened in 2015. This was a while back. And this wasn't a super complex attack. Right now in the news, there's something called, I believe it's called Cuba, some sort of attack that's going on a lot of critical infrastructure organizations in the US. I think over 50 could be affected. I don't see this as science fiction.
Okay, thanks. That was eye-opening. I didn't even know about that hack. But then again, I mean, I remember in 2019 we did a series of articles which predicted the cybersecurity for 2020. Boy, were we wrong. Well, we couldn't foresee Corona, of course, but Michael, you mentioned quite a few sort of attack vectors that these guys use, like spear phishing, denial of service, and maybe Chris, to direct that question to you, what can companies do to prevent these attacks?
I think it starts with visibility. Naturally, every security program on the planet starts with the notion of inventory of assets. I think what the traditional approaches have involved has really been focusing on the IT side of the house, predominantly speaking. So, understanding what IT assets are out there, the software, et cetera, but broader visibility across the entire enterprise is really what we see as a key challenge right now. It's one of the reasons, Armis has been brought into so many different opportunities around the globe, is the ability to see not only what's going on the IT side of the house, but the OT side of the house, the IoT side of the house. I think to Michael's point, the Ukraine power grid attack was pretty interesting, right? Because it started on IT and it moved laterally into the OT side of the house. And those are the sorts of things that we see time and time again, is attackers, rather than staying and compromising traditional IT infrastructure, they're going for the operational side of the house. And back to the original question, and Michael, I thought your answer was brilliant. I think, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And I think the motivations have changed dramatically. It used to be in the old days when I started in security that the breaches were about data exfiltration and intellectual property theft. Now they're about either nation states doing significant damage, or more importantly, we're seeing out and out extortion, where operational technology is being taken out for the purposes of extorting money out of companies. And so the profit sanctuaries are very attractive to folks, and the way they're engaging in these breaches is actually a combination of IT and OT and using those two in combination to extort them. So back to your original question, Patrick, it starts with visibility. You have to see everything to be able to protect it.
Okay, but I mean, of course, you know, especially with IoT, because some of the devices are very small, they're just sensors. But if we talk about more in operational security, operational technology security, how big is the danger that you know, the colonial pipeline, or maybe if you think of a car manufacturer, how dangerous, or how big is the risk that actually some of the production facilities are being attacked? And Kai, I'll turn to you for that question, because you also have the fitting background for that, I think.
Cool, thank you. So this relates back to basically what the state of security is in IIoT/OT security. And unfortunately, there is still a reactive state of mind when people are talking, thinking, and acting about security in, let's just call it OT, including IIoT. That means the idea of the defenders is to basically identify and stop attacks before the damage is too big. So it's about minimizing the damage. It's not about preventing incidents and preventing damage in the first place. So everybody's in DEFCON 1, I believe, is the highest stage, waiting for the next incident to happen. And once the next incident happens and there's a fire somewhere at the horizon, then everybody takes their 2 buckets of sand, rushes over, and tries to extinguish the fire. And I have to admit, the industry has gotten very good at extinguishing fires, but still it's not what you want to do, because it's still allowing the attacker being in the driver's seat and basically take action and drive action. I also want to touch base on something that Chris mentioned. He said asset visibility is the start of it all, and I totally agree with that. And I would even go further than that. It's necessary for companies to know their complete security posture and the context and correlation of all things security related. So it's nothing that is very simple, and it is it's not nothing simple, but still it's just cyber hygiene. There's no black magic. It's just doing the homeworks. All the attacks that were mentioned earlier today, they were just the results of people not doing their homework, or companies not doing the homework in terms of basic OT cybersecurity hygiene.
And yeah, I would absolutely agree. And I also think, you know, the reactive part, that's when, you know, you already have your network, you already have your IoT, your sensors in place. But I think another important part is, I've actually just seen a presentation by Ford Motor Company with the famous quote, "Every company is a software company." So what about software security, Christina?
Well, wow, where do we start? Software security in terms of what actually is happening in the IT or in the OT environment. All those examples we've highlighted so far, as mentioned, started in the IT and moved over to the OT. If you really purely focus on the OT environment, well, it starts with the devices being used, and those devices being used are not designed to be secure per se. Those devices being designed to help improving your business processes, collecting data, make sure that you can improve whatever kind of business processes you want to get highlighted, want to get a competitive advantage on, making sure that you, I don't know, save money or whatever the intention as such is. So taking a look at the OT devices as such and the way they are designed, certainly not designed for security.
That's true. And I think there's another aspect of IoT and OT devices which we need to consider. And that is, are they future-proof? And I'm happy that we have Alan on the call as well. And Alan, you are busy with quantum cryptography, so something which is still a little bit in the future. But then again, I mean, any IoT device which is being put out today needs to be also safe in 20 years. Will they be?
Well, that depends, but yeah, no, I don't disagree with what people are saying so far, but I think if you look at the root cause of many of these OT security problems, it's what Christina was saying. These devices aren't built with adequate security built into them. You know, companies are great at building devices that are meant to last, but they don't have security that's meant to last. And you know, that starts with some of the just very basic things that are, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, people weren't building secure boot into their devices. They weren't building, you know, strong secure communication and just the basic security capabilities of the device, making them much more vulnerable. And you know, we still need visibility, but if the devices have, you know, are hardened against cyber attacks, that will go a long ways towards eliminating these issues. And you know, as you mentioned, you know, the focus I've got now is really around future-proofing security for devices. You know, quantum computers will break RSA and ECC encryption, you know, sometime yet this decade. You know, experts argue whether that's 2026 or 2029, but the reality is the devices we're building today will still be in use well beyond 2030. And so building security into those devices that will, you know, will still be able to be secure down the road is critical. And, you know, and that's something that, you know, NIST is leading the effort to standardize new algorithms to replace RSA and ECC. But a lot of people don't realize they've actually already standardized algorithms for secure code signing. So we do have standardized post-quantum crypto algorithms that can run on today's hardware that we can build into devices today. You know, we're working with some folks that are building secure boot into their devices today that's quantum proof, that's protected from quantum computer attacks. And that way, you know, in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, they can upgrade those devices through firmware updates to support quantum safe TLS and other, you know, other capabilities. And they know that they can trust that because they've got the quantum safe secure boot. So there are things that we can do to future-proof our devices, and you know, the standards are coming along quite well, and the technology really is at a point where people can start building these solutions into their devices.
Yeah, thanks. And I sort of see two topics emerging from the discussion so far. One is sort of, as Kai mentioned, the reactive state. So what are we doing with those devices in IoT which are already out there? How can we secure those? And then on the other hand, how can we make sure that going forward, IoT devices is more secure than it really was? But let's maybe start with the first question. So how can we ensure that the insecure devices we have now are not causing a major blackout or attack, as described in what Michael said, for example? Kai, you want to start again?
So now the trouble with be it OT, be it IIoT, is the devices are typically not touchable, either because they are from the Stone Ages and they break down when something is being installed on them, or because they're running 24/7, or they disturb the processes otherwise. So what needs to be done is a way needs to be found to take care of hygiene in these devices in the environment. So we have to accept that some devices are just not touchable. So, and instead of continuing to giving customers advice, you need to upgrade it, you need to upgrade it. And the customer says, can't upgrade it, can't upgrade it. We need to be able to give advice to customers in how to harden the environment around the unhardenable machines. And as Michael said earlier today, it's not complex. It's all very basic. It might be the change of a firewall rule. It might be the change of an access control list in a switch. It's no black magic. It is something that needs to be done, though, on a holistic level, encompassing the complete security posture of the complete customer's OT environment. And that's how it's possible today to harden customers' environments while still having unhardenable devices, IoT devices, or PLCs.
Yeah, that's true. But just how realistic is that? I mean, we're already talking about for bigger corporations, they have hundreds of thousands of PCs, servers, IoT devices, security, operational technology devices. So how realistic is that to actually harden all of these? Michael, you want to take a shot?
Sure. I mean, like Kai mentioned, it's not rocket science. And also, as Chris mentioned, not only do you have to understand what you have in your network, you also have to understand where they're located. What network segments are they located in? Who is communicating with whom, right? So sometimes you have certain parts of the network that should never be talking to one another. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's a connection coming in. We've seen in another situation where we've spoken with clients and we asked them, how many devices do you have in your network? And they're like, oh yeah, we have 15,000 devices. And then when we actually went ahead and looked at how many devices they had, they were closer to 17,000 devices. And 500 of those were connected to the internet and they had no idea. So know where they're located, know who's communicating with whom, understand which protocols, right? And IoT devices, not just in the enterprise, but also on the industrial, they don't always use encryption for communicating with one another. And sometimes they just speak on protocols that either we don't know of or are not secure. And ultimately, these things, like I mentioned, it's not so hard to fix once you understand where everything is. Once you understand what the networks are, you can sort of put together a plan of what do you want to do going forward. So it's not rocket science. It's all about who are the big boys in the room that are making those decisions, and are they prioritizing the security and the hygiene of the network, or do they just want to cross off a checkbox?
Okay, I think, yeah, that brings us back to 2 points. The first one is visibility. Chris, since you started the topic, I'd like to give it back to you. And afterwards, I think the question of protocols, which you just mentioned, Michael, but let's start with the visibility first.
Yeah, I think Kai, you mentioned, you used a specific term in your opening comments, and the term was context. And I think context is extremely important here. So visibility, yes, I need to have the deep visibility into what the devices are. Michael, to your point, where they're located, but the full context includes the communication aspects as well. What are they doing? Are they supposed to be speaking to across boundaries, across network segments? And if they are, then you can let that go through. But if those devices should not be communicating outside their network segments, then you need to be able to see that, understand that, and then use the network infrastructure to isolate those communications, whether it's sending a rule to a firewall for external communications, or even segmenting through a network access control platform to isolate those devices. That full context, along with the visibility, is how you get this full security posture that Kai and Michael have been talking about here. And so, yes, it starts with the visibility, but then you layer in the context, full context of what the device is, what it's doing, and what it should be doing, and use that information to inform your security decisions.
Okay, and now for the protocols I mentioned, Christina, I think you're a good contact, or you can probably have some good arguments about the protocols, because as Michael said, there's protocols which are decades old, and they can probably not be changed. So from the software point of view, how can we secure unhardened devices which are running on software which probably no one understands these days even?
Yep, absolutely. It's not about only about segmentation and controlling and basically overseeing who's communicating with whom and what kind of traffic is basically exchanged. It's also taking a look into the traffic as such. What kind of parameters are modified? Who does modify those parameters? And of course, is this modification legitimate or not? And that brings along that for certain protocols, you need to take a look into what's happening. Why is this happening? Understanding visibility was one of the topics which was raised several times already. And that visibility comes not only with a mushroom popping up, trying to communicate with someone, even outside the OT environment to the internet. it's also that same kind of mushroom coming up with information being exchanged, where you can see parameters which are modified are not in the appropriate environment or condition anymore, which means that based on a certain kind of purpose, you could actually cause one of those IoT or IIoT devices to collapse for whatever kind of reason. We've seen this a couple of years ago with the German steel mill, where parameters were modified, and based on that modification, a service outage was caused just because people can do it, and just because the communication as such was not basically driven in a secure way.
Yeah, that brings me back to not my initial question, but to the topic of complexity. I mean, you mentioned network segregation and making sure that only communication which is wanted is actually allowed. So a need to know principle and things like that. But I mean, I think in cybersecurity, we're all a little bit nerds to some degree. And, I have a small firewall here at home. I have three or four different networks. And it's really complex just setting up that on a very small scale. So, Alan, how can you manage that in a large enterprise or, an operating facility, production facility?
Yeah, no, it's a challenge. I mean, and that's why we've got, multiple people on this call working for large organizations that are delivering those services, right? It's not something that most organizations are able to deliver on their own. But I still look at the problem kind of upside down, I think, of what a lot of people are, in that, if we think about industrial fires and home fires over the last 50 years or 100 years, the solution wasn't just better defensive mechanisms, right? It wasn't more fire stations and better fire trucks. That was part of the solution. But another part of the solution is we now build homes to industrial buildings that have more fire resistant materials, and there's regulations that push that down. And the same thing is needed here. We need to build devices that are at their core much more difficult to hack. If devices are easy to hack, then having monitoring around them becomes even more important. And we'll never get rid of the monitoring. We're never going to get rid of the fire stations. Devices will still get hacked. There'll still be fires. But the more that we can do to make buildings hard to burn, the more that we can do to make devices that are hard to hack, the better we're going to be. And in this industry, I see for every dollar that's spent on somebody building security into their devices, I see $10 or $50 spent on monitoring solutions to help protect and secure devices after they're deployed, and other defensive solutions. And I think that's starting to slowly shift in the industry. The OEMs, the people building the devices, are taking greater measures to build security in. But the challenge is the long supply chain, right? It takes a long time for those secure devices to replace the existing legacy devices that are in the field. But so there's both sides of the coin that have to be balanced. But I still see a much greater need in investing in ensuring that we start with devices that are highly secured and very difficult to hack.
I think that's a very good point. But if we're talking on the enterprise and large organization level, I mean, they know what they have to lose, right? I mean, if I don't know, car manufacturer has to stop their production for a day, that will literally cost them millions of dollars. But what about smaller and medium-sized businesses, and also what about the consumers? Because consumers, they have more IoT devices these days as well. They have surveillance cameras, they have routers, they have all these small devices for the smart home, but they are looking for the cheapest device. And building security into those devices is not going to make them the cheapest devices. And while I agree there need to be standards out there, but we're still not there yet. There are a couple of initiatives also on, I think, a European Union level at least. But Michael, where is that taking us?
Well, it's kind of interesting that you mentioned this, because it's a trend. Like, let's think about, for example, an industrial facility. They buy one machine, cost them maybe a few $1 million, but this machine they know is going to give them production for 20, 30, 40 years. It's going to operate in cold weather and hot weather. and it's going to pretty much run and do everything that it can, and it's a significant investment. Like you mentioned, IoT devices in general are cheap, right? When the company needs to roll out 500 new security cameras, they're not going to buy the top-notch, state-of-the-art, made in the USA or made in Germany stuff. They're probably going to get something that's going to be made in China from some cheap manufacturer. It does the job. And those devices, they probably have their own, operating system. They probably have call to home functions that goes to some satellite and to some network in China or some cloud. And it's a mess. And that's currently what happens. I'm sure Chris has seen this a lot at his days at Armis. I mean, the amounts of random IoT devices that they have in their networks are just absurd. And I think Armis had a really cool post. It was like, why does my MRI scanner have a Facebook account? Right? This is one of your webinars, and we're seeing this more often. I mean, we're seeing a lot of other things on the manufacturing side of things, which I shouldn't be mentioning here. But ultimately, that's pretty much what we're seeing, and that's pretty much the trend with IoT devices. They're very diverse. They come from many different companies. They're all over the place. And pretty much what it does is it opens up the attack surface into many of those organizations. So yes, they're very cheap, and yes, they help with other things, but there needs to be some sort, but there is a trade-off of security, and there needs to be someone who is doing their own, I guess, policy for this in companies, because I mean, many compliance and frameworks were trying to be put in for IoT, but because it's so diverse and because it's such a mess, it's been so difficult. And there currently is no regulation. I know they're planning to do something. I read something a few days ago. They're trying to add some regulations to IoT devices, but meanwhile it's just talks. And until there won't be some internal policy, things can continue to be a mess.
They surely will. I mean, look at the Mirai botnet, right? I mean, that's quite a while ago now. I think it was 2018 when that happened. But how, if we look at the thing, or if we look at it from a different perspective, because obviously cyber criminals, they take the path of least resistance, right? So they might not try to attack an enterprise or larger organization directly because it's so difficult with all the security measures around that. But maybe they go into the consumer, small, medium-sized businesses. Let's maybe focus on the small, medium-sized businesses. How afraid do I need to be as someone from the small and medium-sized businesses that my stuff is being hacked and maybe used as a sort of jump host to a bigger attack, or even just sort of breaching my data? And Christina, I know Checkpoint, you have something for small and medium business sizes as well. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we should all be afraid a little bit in such sense, because being a small, medium business, I could just be collateral damage, which means that I'm being used to do something great. And taking Mirai as an example, what happened? Well, we had a DNS outage, which cost the big companies on this planet, the big companies in the internet doing their business there, to lose millions of dollars. Even though I was not supposed to be part of that attack. I was collateral damage because my device was used in a certain way. And this is the same way with small, medium business, as well as with large size businesses. The first thing we normally talk about is user awareness. So how much are the users in the company aware of what security means? Security in the IT as well as in the OT environment, how cautious are they? How, let's say, generous are they with providing additional information? I think all those good attacks have started with spear phishing. So just look for the weakest link in that attack chain. And the weakest link could be user. It could be a not patched device, which is potentially somewhere connected to the internet, which did not happen on purpose. Or maybe just thinking one step further, because we talked a lot about the security of the devices as such. I mean, those devices with their intelligence are supposed to fill a purpose, and that purpose is collecting data for whatever kind of reason. That data needs to be stored somewhere. Could be internally, could be somewhere in the cloud. So taking one step further, the whole security discussion needs to be put on the table. And something we at Checkpoint see on a regular basis is that the security department as such is not empowered. They're supposed to be part of the table discussions. They're supposed to tick the checkbox. But when it comes down to, guys, we need to reconsider the security design as such. We need to basically empower the security teams within the different kind of departments. This is the time when a lot of companies just look for plan B. And that plan B is not good enough. And whether you're a small, medium business or one of those large size companies, you got to be prepared. Being prepared, by the way, one last sentence also means, are you prepared if something happens? So what kind of initiatives do you basically kick off if there is an attack? Could be a ransomware attack affecting your OT environment. We've seen it a couple of times this year already. But it also could be is something where one of your devices is causing whatever kind of damage. And that means, what do you do next? And a lot of companies are hit by surprise, and this is also not supposed to happen.
Thanks. I think you touched or you mentioned quite a few very interesting points here. And the weakest link, it's always where the attack will be. And very often that is the human factor, because I think personally that cybersecurity is not a mindset or is not as strong as a mindset in our society in general. It could be or should be. But you also mentioned, because looking at the time, you also mentioned at the very beginning that we all should panic. And I think most of us know the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which actually says, don't panic. But I'd like to ask that question to each of you as a sort of last question. Do we need to panic, Kai?
No, it's stressful and it's going to require work, but we don't need to panic. We just need to do our work properly.
Okay, great. Alan, do you agree?
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think we need to panic. I mean, there's going to be cyber attacks. There will be significant impact from these cyber attacks, but I don't think we need to panic, but we do need to be proactive.
Chris, same here, or?
Yeah, same. The question is not, if, but rather when. But do we need to panic in that regard? Absolutely not. What we need to do is be prepared. Back to my comment about visibility, let's make sure we're seeing everything on the environment. But above and beyond that, right, understand that the motives for most of these breaches today have shifted now to, as I mentioned previously, extortion. So be aware that is the motivation of these attackers, and focus on your systems, your critical systems, in a way that you're going to minimize, any potential extortion event along the way, right? So see the entire environment and understand the full context. Have your security program focused on the entire enterprise, whether you are a large company, whether you're a small company. Even we talked a little bit about consumers before, right? That's a matter of awareness. I would argue that in a consumer context, recall just a few months back that the Amazon Alexa introduced a new function called a sidewalk. If you recall, sidewalk was an opt-in feature where those Amazon Alexas were participating in a broader Wi-Fi mesh network. So it even goes down to awareness at the individual level that don't just accept that opt-in for a feature like that, because that will potentially expose you along the way. So let's be aware at all levels, understand what the motivations are, and build our systems to help prevent that.
Okay, great. Michael, time to panic?
My motto has always been, don't be scared, be prepared. So in general, a well-prepared network is difficult to attack. Number two, it slows down the attackers and it allows the defenders to take action. And number three, might be still attacked occasionally, but the damage that is caused is minimal. One of the best ways that I can propose this to many of my existing clients I've been an athlete. I was in sports, and before every game, we would have practice, right? We would sort of simulate the plays that the other team would be doing, and we would sort of prepare on those. So why don't we put together a playbook, right? Let's say, today, major attack happens. Who's the chain of command? Who's in charge? If the person is in charge, who isn't? What do? We sort of like do this every once in a while to sort of simulate something, just to prepare. It's sort of like a fire drill. I know Alan spoke about fires before, so this sort of inspired this. It's sort of a fire drill, understanding who's going to do what. Once you have all that in place, when something does happen, and if you follow Kai's advice and you have good network hygiene, you have good segmentation, like Christine mentioned, and you have visibility, right? Like Chris mentioned. Ultimately, when something does happen, it's really easy to recover. You close all the holes, and the ship continues. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, cool. Christina, it's usually ladies first, but in that case, you have the final words on this.
Let me make it short and simple. Don't panic, be prepared. There's always an answer, 42, right?
42 is always the answer. I think that we can all agree upon.
Yes.
All right, so thanks everyone. That was a really interesting discussion, and we're definitely going to take that forward. And yeah, let's hope that every one of you seems to think we don't need to panic. Let's hope that reality plays out that way. We've had some bad experience in the past 2 years, but I'm always optimistic looking into the future. So thanks everyone again.